What's up, guys? My name is Zach.hoereth, and I'm from Indianapolis. Austin, thanks for having us out. Didn't know I was going to be speaking today, but really, I just kind of quick background. I started back in 2018, was doing single-family homes, kind of grew up with my grandparents had a few rental properties, so on the weekends I was painting units and, kind of doing the self-management game, if you will. But through college, I became a real estate agent, did a couple single-family rentals, a few flips here and there, an Airbnb or two. And that eventually moved into multifamily. I'm not to, where's Luke at? He disappear. I'm not to his level just yet in terms of syndication. I'm a big joint venture guy. Pretty much everything to date, I have not touched anything with the SEC. It's pretty simple, right? I go find a guy with the money. I go find the deal. I try to figure out, hey, how can I operate this to my best of my ability? And I try to partner, because when I first started in college, I had no money. I was valeting cars, and I realized, hey, I need to start maybe selling some houses here, earn some commission money, and throw that back into rental properties. But what I learned was, and I think Luke mentioned this, the economies of scale is definitely big in multifamily, but I will never pass up a single family deal. So today I have a couple of small apartment buildings. I have a handful of single family homes. I still act as a real estate agent. Not a huge fan of it, but it's a little bit better than working, I guess at Jimmy John's or something like that. So I want to answer some questions that you guys have. I know we've talked about Airbnb, about single families. I am a big buy and hold person as well. I don't do the flip game. If it makes sense, hey, you can make a quick buck. I've done wholesaling of, pretty much everything in the book. I don't have a big company, like Kyler, but I'm an open book. I structure deals as simple as possible. I don't go and raise millions of dollars worth of money, but I typically will go to a normal person that has, hey, 50, 100 grand, and they don't have necessarily the time or maybe the knowledge to go out and operate those kind of deals. And I, as a young guy, I don't have much money, or I didn't have much money. And so that's kind of where that connection made sense. So I know some of you guys are asking, I know it's attractive, the wholesaling model, the Airbnb model. I think those are great. But I think longer term cash flow is definitely the play. So I don't know I know you were asking some questions on the syndication game, but for folks that maybe, don't have a ton of liquidity, like I had when I first started out, $50,000, $100,000 that some of these syndicators require when you're getting started, you're not accredited. You got to be able to find opportunities to go out and make more money. And so what I did was I leveraged my time to go out and figure out, hey, how can I find these distressed sellers? How can I get to these sellers that maybe don't know what they have, and really get some of that equity in my corner? So to date, like I said, we started in the single families. I've done Section 8, I've done market rate, and I think that longer term, real estate is one of the best asset classes that you can be in.
I love it. And we talked about you had 16 units and 8 units, but I love your term you kind of coined is like, I'm picking up more cattle. And I love that, because ultimately, I think that what I love about you is you've removed full emotion from it. And it's like, what's these walls? What can it make me?
Yep.
So a lot of people would say, yeah, wait for the bigger deal, but you're all about, here's a deal, let's take it down, let's make it happen, and then move forward.
And I think there's probably some good and bad to that, right? In terms of how I want to eventually structure my portfolio and a company. But one of my mentors, his name is Matty A. He's got syndications going, he's got single families going, and he's kind of, doing the best of both worlds. And so for me, if the deal makes sense and there's money to be made, I'm happy to do it. I'm not a door game guy. Like, you'll hear some of these people like, hey, I have, 10,000 doors, and that's all good and well. But when I first started, I'm like, man, this dude's got 3,000 apartments. Like, he's driving a Ferrari to work. Like, what's going on here, right? And come to find out, maybe that's not always the case. And again, everybody's got kind of a different scenario in terms of their time, what they're doing for a normal job. Like, not everybody has maybe the amount of time that you do when you first start out. So I tried to leverage that to my best of my ability. But honestly, I think when you can look at a deal and say, hey, I'm not just in this for a quick 10,000 or a quick, we talk about relationships. I've had deals come back to me where I would have never have thought in a million years, hey, this is going to make sense. But just by maybe having a quick call with somebody or reaching out, showing that, hey, look, I'm not just here to take or make a quick buck off of you. I think I mentioned this the other day on a call. Like, when you're buying some of these things that you're planning to hold long term, and you're not just flipping a house in 3 months, you want to make sure that it's quality over quantity, right? I know you guys are spending a ton of money on marketing, and that's a different ballgame. But for me in the multifamily space and in my market in Indianapolis, when you get into this network and you start to really rub elbows with other people in the investor world, it's a pretty small network. And so you don't want to be that guy that's like, oh man, he's a freaking pain in the butt to work with, right? You want to be a class act in terms of how you're operating your business and creating relationships.
What do you like about it?
So I'm actually in tertiary markets of Indy. And personally, I think that you can get a better price for your rent, like price per door and your rent ratio. Like we just closed so I'm a broker, like I mentioned. So some people come to say, hey, like, why aren't you buying this deal? Well, it doesn't fit my criteria, right? And so I just sold a 16-unit apartment building built in the late 1970s. We sold it for $62,500 a door. It'll rent for $800. I just bought a 19-unit about a year and a half ago for $23,600 a door that rents for $600 to $700, right? So when you are creating these relationships and you're kind of looking for these opportunities, that's kind of where I see tertiaries becoming a little bit more attractive, in my opinion. You're not having to go and compete with some of these coastal guys that have way more money, right? The guys from California, the guys from New York that maybe they sell a house, they have 1031 cash. The competition's lower. It's to some extent low-hanging fruit. Go ahead.
I got you, man. So you make it sound all so simple, but you got a lot of balls in the air. You got the brokerage, you got your rentals, you're doing multifamily. What's your team structure like, and how heavy do you lean on those guys to make everything run?
Dude, there's definitely a lot of moving parts, but like I mean, I'm kind of lazy in all honesty. Like I don't really like to leave my apartment unless I'm like going to the gym or going to look at a property. I have really two partners that I lean on. One of those is my number one guy on the brokerage side of things. So when I get a brokerage deal that comes in, I don't really want to, I don't like being a real estate agent. It's just kind of easy, especially when you've been in the business for a little while, you kind of understand how it works. But what I've tried to create around myself is some other younger, like kind of motivated individuals that are hungry enough to go and take on these opportunities. And I'm sort of I guess kind of like rainmaker in a sense, and I can pass that deal on to them and be more focused on, hey, how do I go acquire more apartment buildings and building some of that longer term wealth? On the apartment side of things, yeah, I do wear a couple of hats. I think Luke got asked the question, how are you raising capital and looking for deals all at once? I mean, that's kind of the name of the game. Like for me, I get an adrenaline rush it's like I'm just kind of a deal junkie, right? And that's where I'm like, hey, if it's a single family deal that I can go pick up for, 30 grand, that's going to rent for $700-800, dude, let's do it, right? Let's get it done. Let's go buy a 20-unit apartment building. So to me, I don't have like, I'm not super stressed about it. But at that same token too, I don't have 30 people behind me. I think Blake had mentioned she's got like 5 virtual assistants. I'd love to get to that, and I probably will. Just probably shows maybe some weakness in my business.
So there's a lot of young kids here that
Yep.
either becoming an agent or an agent.
Yep.
And the first thing they would say is, I'm going to be an investor. Okay. What would you say to them? I think that's great, but like, you have to kind of understand the mechanisms of your business first.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you first start as an agent, you need to make some money, right? You need to be able to prove to yourself that you can earn income. When I moved back to Indianapolis, I was going to school in Florida, and I moved back to Indiana because I knew I wanted to become like a landlord or, have rentals. I realized that the people that honestly have all the money are the folks that own property, not so much the real estate agents, especially in a market where home values or just property prices in general are pretty low. I realized I'm like, hey, I can use the brokerage route, becoming a real estate agent or doing wholesales to almost like, I think Diego uses this term, like creating a cash machine for myself, creating commission, creating these fees and using those fees to dump into rental properties, apartment buildings. But yeah, like really double down as a real estate agent, become really good at it. And so that you're the guy that, hey, I want to use this particular real estate agent, so that you constantly have these leads coming in, you're constantly making commissions. And then at some point in time, you can kind of work yourself out of that. You see some of these real estate agents and wholesalers too, that are maybe a little bit older, they're in the hamster wheel, right? It's a constant chase of, hey, when can I go make that next commission? When can I go make that next fee? And that doesn't matter if it's a $10,000 commission, a $10,000 fee, or $100,000. You go and you do it. It's a big rush, but then it's done, right? And so for me, I'm like, I'll go get the single families, I'll go get the apartment buildings, and you create this massive portfolio, and you have cash constantly churning in, and then you don't have to be kind of like, for lack of a better term, like a servant or a real estate agent sometimes, because I know everybody who's a real estate agent here has had those clients where like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with these people, right? So like, I'm trying to work myself out of being a real estate agent as quickly as possible. Yeah.
What in these tertiary markets that you look in, what are the indicators that you that you focus on?
Population is big. I made a kind of a bad mistake on my first multifamily deal. I bought a apartment building in a town with like 4,000 people. Um, so you kind of like, that's pretty self-explanatory. You kind of cycle like, not that it was a bad deal. It's just when you buy in these tertiary markets, you have to be very careful about getting into a market where there's, you know, freaking 10 people, like you hear the term like a one horse town. That's what this was. But population is big. I look at usually like the last 2 decades of growth or not growth. Um, One thing people I think tend to get into like this analysis paralysis as they get into investing on their own, maybe not so much syndications, but you're like doing your own deal, is like you're not a hedge fund, you're not a REIT, right? Like I understand you want to make sure you're getting into a market that there's showing some signs of growth, some signs of just stability. But I know that I'm not going to go into a market, you know, with 100,000 people and go serve 3,000 units. That I'm just not there yet, right? Maybe one day, maybe maybe that's the case. But I talk to too many investors who are like, well, so the population growth is this, and that's great, right? Well, the job growth and the median income, and I get all that, but if you're going to buy an 8-unit building in a town that has like 200,000 or 300,000 people, like obviously you don't want to see the population declining, but that's kind of, I guess, pretty base level. I don't know if that answers your question. So I try to keep it like pretty generic. And again, I'm not dealing, like Luke is dealing with more sophisticated kind of institutional type money, debt. I'm not doing that kind of stuff. The properties in, like, to give you an example, the properties in the Midwest. So a 19 unit we picked up for $450,000. And you think, oh my God, like I go buy a single family home here for that. But it's not in a war zone. It's not in this like really crappy area. It's just working class folks. Like that is a majority of America, especially in the Midwest, right? We're not going to Orlando or Atlanta where we're going to go pay over $100,000 a door. That's just not the case. Kyler?
Yeah, man. So in investing in these smaller markets,
Yeah.
how do you protect yourself from just being over leveraged? And if for whatever reason we did have a significant downturn, how do you have a plan for that? Or
Well, so like I really try to, like, not in a bad way, but steal the properties to where I'm not over leveraged. Like I will usually go get shorter term private debt, not from like, not hard money, like investors who are pretty well set, like that have nice balance sheets. And I kind of keep that it's a tight knit group of people so that I'm not just going to every like swinging Joe out there like, hey, you got 50 grand? Like that's not me. Like I'd rather go to somebody that I know that isn't really going to bother me, that's going to write me a check for 250,000 and like, hey, go do your thing. But part of that's come from, you know, building a track record, kind of creating some traction through single family, through small multis. But to answer your question, I just want to make sure that we have enough reserves on hand. We're buying the property at, you know, significantly less than what it's really worth, right? I should probably have a better metric on that, but I don't. But when you're buying deals for, you know, 20, 30 grand a door and they're going to rent for $600-700 a month, you know, I'm a big fan of Section 8. I know some people kind of associate a negative connotation with Section 8. I think that people are really missing the boat there because there's a ton of money to be made in that space, and people will say, oh, it's just a bit, you know, piece of shit property, just throw Section 8 in there. No. Those folks want a clean and safe environment just like anybody else, right? Any market rate tenant. And if you can provide that, those people will stay longer and the government will pay a portion of that. So I have a few single families and even a couple of our apartment units are you know, housing authority, if you will.
Talking to a few people down there, it seems like there's a real crunch for supply and high demand.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the same thing in Louisville.
Yep.
So I was curious, what are you seeing in Indianapolis and those outside markets?
It's much easier because people aren't looking there. You talk to your average investor from, you know, San Diego or, you know, New York, like everybody's like, oh yeah, Indianapolis or Louisville or Cincinnati. It's like, well, go outside like an hour and a half of that particular market of Louisville, right? Biggest thing though that I've really struggled with, and I'll eventually bring it in-house, is management. You know, there's some really, I think, good things to be had in these tertiary markets, but you don't, at that same token, you don't have as many management vendors, right? So you don't have as the like high of level of sophistication in terms of your management. So for me, I want to get to a certain unit count or revenue on a monthly basis to where I can bring that in-house and solve that problem, right? You can't go to one of these like kind of run-of-the-mill real estate companies. It's like, well, we're not really selling many houses, we'll manage your property, right? Like, dude, your property's gonna get ran into the ground. So you can quickly take a good deal and sour it that way. So I will say though, in these tertiary markets, as you're operating this small multifamily space, even if it's single families, you're gonna be like working with people that are less sophisticated, not necessarily a bad way. They just don't know what they have, and so you need to leverage that. And I mean, like I just did a deal the first part of January. It was an 8-unit apartment building. We picked it up for $175,000, and I found it on a for sale by owner sign in front of the complex. Like, it's a no-brainer, right? So stuff like that. I mean, we're going all direct to seller. You know, you can work with brokers, but you know, there's other ways to do it. I mean, obviously establish the relationships, but yeah, go ahead.
You know, with those kind of deals, are you doing this like a BRRRR model?
Yeah. Like I'll go get private cash, and like that particular one, I double close, I wholesale to somebody because I'm trying to buy something in between 50 and 100 units. So you kind of get to this point, and this is back to Luke's message, you know, about the economies of scale. When you start buying like duplexes and fourplexes, it's kind of like this progression of where you want to go bigger, right? Like I know Cade and his partner are doing single families right now. I would venture to guess they're going to start to go bigger, right? But I think that when you look at this stuff, you have to have an exit strategy, right? So I figure out, okay, if I put a deal under contract, can I close it myself? And if I'm going to do that, I want to make sure I raise the money on the front end, and I already have the like joint venture kind of structure already laid out in my mind, and who's the investor I'm going to go and pair with this deal, right? If I don't want to end up buying it and holding it, can I wholesale it or double close it to someone else, right? That's kind of my other exit. And then see if there's not enough spread or margin, I'll broker it, right? But to answer your question, yeah, it's kind of like a BRRRR model. I'm looking for these distressed assets, if you will, to go in, fix them up. And some people will buy them turnkey, or you just refi them and hold on to those things long term. Go ahead.
What are you looking at in terms of like lender rates? So
Lender rates?
what are you willing to get?
So I try to get long term. So the biggest difference between like your residential and your commercials on this kind of smaller multifamilies, you're going to have these usually 5-year balloon type loans. I hate that stuff. So I try to find lenders that'll do 20-year amortization, fully am, right, term, with no balloons. But you're usually going to pay like a variable interest rate, which I don't mind, because if I can pick the properties up cheap enough, like if you can't make money at 6%, I mean, not that you're going to go pay 6% in this environment, but if that interest rate starts to creep up, you need to underwrite that in the front side so that you can account for it. But yeah, that's usually it's on a refi. If I'm buying cash, they'll usually do, like, I got a guy who's doing 75 or 80% loan to value on a refi, and they'll do a 20-year fully amortized term, but it's a variable interest rate. No, right now I'm at a 4.25. Yeah. Yeah. But all these are like, don't go to like your bigger lenders, go to your smaller credit unions, those banks. I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard of that. This is all non-agency recourse debt. When I mean non-agency, it's not Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So you're going to go get, some of these brokers, but you got to push them, be super organized when you go and do that, and just make their life a whole lot easier. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can chat more about it too.
You hear all these different interest rates and everything. I'm just kind of wondering, like, when I was doing private money research,
Yeah.
12 to 15%, that's really expensive for what you're trying to do. So.
Well, too, like what I mentioned earlier, I find people that they're super liquid. They're usually like, this is all within my immediate network, family, friends, right? And I'll go and do like no points on the front end. I'll usually do 8 to anywhere from 12%, and I try to get that money back within a year, if not, sooner. If I know a project's going to take me 3 months, I'm going to tell them 12. And then they're like, wow, you brought this back, so that's how I keep the relationship.
For sure.
Yep.
Do you have all your stuff under like one LLC?
No, I do a separate LLC for every new property we do, because I may be bringing in different partners. I love equity. I'm not a fee guy. So I try to figure out how can I get as much equity in this as what I can. And then just from an organization, from an accounting standpoint, legal standpoint, we have everything in different entities.
What's the cheapest and fastest way to get those LLCs done?
Do them yourself.
Do them yourself on just like a...
Yeah, just go to your state. Like there's, and again, this is much different. I don't want you guys to take this the wrong way. I'm not doing anything with the SEC. This is not like, I'm not going to place institutional money, but like you get on your local state website and you can go, fill out an LLC in 10, 15 minutes instead of paying an attorney, $3,000 to do it.
You understand this is I'll do an hour and a half conversation on Airbnb, and this is the number one.
Yeah, I mean, people are like, well, what should I name the LLC? Dude, I don't know. Like, literally, this is how I do my LLCs. We take the property street address, and that's the LLC. It's like 676, whatever, LLC. Got it? Because then from like, when it comes to accounting, like I'm OCD in terms of organization. So I like open it up. I can get the K1s done. I can get it, like then it just kind of, it starts to go. It's different for the single families. I'll go back to your question. I don't have all my single families in separate entities. If I do like 5 and 1, I'll keep it that way. But sorry, what was?
I was going to say, if you're doing like a BRRRR deal,
Yeah.
purchase it under an LLC, are you able to refinance under that LLC?
For apartments or singles? Honestly, dude, I don't do as many BRRRR deals on the single families just because when you like, I don't know how many of y'all are doing residential versus commercial, but when you get into commercial, there's so much more money to be made because you're just playing with more zeros. And so you can go and spend, and this sounds crazy, and I've read this in books and podcasts, and I thought people are full of shit, but you know, people are like, oh, it takes the same amount of time to go buy a single family home as what it does to go buy a 20-unit apartment building. And that literally, that same experience happened to me within about a span of a year, and it's 100% true. I bought a 19-unit apartment building at the same time while I was buying a duplex, and the duplex was a freaking nightmare of a headache as opposed to the 19-unit apartment building. So like I'm super bullish on, you know, getting more in the apartment space. The only reason that I migrated more towards the joint venture structures because I didn't have money to just passively invest, right? And so again, you kind of have to have that self-awareness or realization of what do I want to do? Like, I'm not probably going to go be the next Grant Cardone, right? That's just not me. But you just got to figure that out. And if you want to do single families, you know, figure that out and then structure it so that you can build out the model.
For the property management, I know what you were talking about getting it in-house. How are you planning on doing that? I'm wondering, like, who's on site or how often they're going there?
Yeah.
Especially just not being, like, close by.
Yeah, so like the properties, one section of my portfolio is about an hour and a half away. And so I have like 34 units in that market, which is scatter site. It's not one building. But my plan is to get a larger apartment building, like probably north of like 75, 80 units. And I'll have an on-site leasing agent, on-site maintenance. And then my goal is honestly, it's to have about 600 units in this particular market and springboard that into larger tertiaries, if you will. But I'm kind of using this market that I'm in right now as kind of a test run. But I got to get to a certain threshold as far as revenue to be able to do that. And so as you creep up closer to 100 units, you'd probably know that from just, you know, what you're doing. But it's all about the revenue game in terms of like, okay, if I'm paying this property manager 8 or 10%, how many properties do I need to have to be able to bring that in-house and just salary someone out? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Like I'm just gonna build it, but I gotta keep buying. I think too many people are like, well, I'll build out the management structure. And I forget who said it. Somebody said like sales and revenue cures all, right? If you can have a bunch of money coming in, okay, hey, great, I'll go buy some employees. So, yep.
So, are you using like a outsourced bookkeeping, or do you have it in-house? And also, at what point did you decide on your bookkeeping system, and like where do you see it going?
So I don't know if you guys are familiar. There's a bunch of like free tools out there, but I use a bookkeeping. It's called Stessa or Stressa. It's like an asset management tool, and like I said, I'm super OCD on that kind of stuff. So I do that. Then I have a separate bookkeeper that like they're, I guess, in-house, if you will. And then I just have an accounting firm. But dude, honestly, when you get like, I kind of outgrew like the hometown accountant because they didn't understand, hey, this like I'm buying apartment buildings with no money, but you're still showing depreciation and how is this all working? So you got to really like, it's kind of the same thing. I used to think when people say, oh, you're building a team, like I was like, yeah, whatever. But no, like it is important, right? Like get your accountant in line, get your attorneys in line, especially as you start to go bigger and even kind of migrate more towards like these, 100-unit apartment deals. Even if you have, little triplexes, 8 units, 12 units, you need to have all that stuff organized so that you can help leverage yourself to go bigger. So, yeah, I mean, that's for all the properties we have a QuickBooks account, and then so we'll just go in there and update it. But all this Stessa platform, it's linked to all of our bank accounts. You can separate it by portfolio. I'll send it to you. I think it's Stessa or Stressa, but you can get on there and it's great. You can put multifamily, you can have leases in there. It's a fantastic resource and it's all free. So, all right, anybody else? Oh, sorry, dude. What up?
Joint venture, I know you said you're focused heavily on that, and I know we were talking about equity splits last night.
Yep.
What are you looking for in a JV partner, and what's kind of the equity structure in those?
Dude, like some people will bring deals because they know that I can, like I really will try, like I want to get shit done quick, right? So if you bring a deal, hey, let's do something together. What do you want to do, right? What does that partner have? Do they have money? Do they want to learn on the deal? Like I can kind of supplement where there's like, I guess a weakness, if you will, but it's really, hey, if this person has money and they don't really want to mess with it, like, hey, Zach, here's 100 grand, here's 50 grand, go do your thing. If it's, hey, Zach, I got a deal. I don't really have any money. I don't really know how to operate this. Can we do it together? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, well, what's the equity split going to be? Well, what do I have to bring to the table? What are you going to bring to the table, right? And so for me, like, if I go find a 10-unit or 50-unit apartment building tomorrow, and I know that I can go and, like, I can find the deal, I can source it, I can operate it, I just got to go and find the money. Well, the money guys probably aren't going to want to do or have the responsibility that I'm going to have in terms of operations, right? Like, hey, just write me a check and wire, send it in the mail. Like, just leave me alone, right? Does that answer? And like my JV structures are super simple. People will call me like, hey man, how are you doing these? What are you bringing? Okay, you're bringing a down payment and the CapEx money, capital expenditures money. Okay, great. Well, I'll get the inspection costs going. I'll get the LLC started. Okay, great. 50 fit. Okay, great. Well, 60 foot, right? Like it's all, you gotta, that's the beautiful thing about real estate. There's no one way to go out and do a deal. So cool. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.